All right, in this video, I am going to be covering some health and fitness information for first responders. My intention is to give you guys the best information that I have available. I have a background in strength and conditioning at the Division I level. I've trained athletes from all different ages and backgrounds. I've trained hundreds of different athletes, and I am not a first responder. I do not have experience with that, but I don't think that should deter you from the information that I'm providing because, again, I have a master's in this. I have a lot of experience. And ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody has the same type of needs when it comes to adaptation. I'm going to be covering some basic kind of physiology, health, longevity, injuries, and how that all relates to duty, your nutrition needs, rest and recovery methods, and some tools that you could potentially use as well, intensity in the form of RPE as well as volume, what to be aware of with that. And then at the end of the video, we're going to talk a little bit about programming based on schedule. So this is primarily driven towards police and fire. So I pulled up some common schedules just to have a little bit of information on that. So to kick things off, when it comes to training, there isn't a unique need as far as, let's say somebody has a background as an athlete or a first responder or somebody in general population, and they are looking to enhance their strength, right? There isn't some specific technique that enhances strength, right? There are general principles that you follow to make sure that you are getting stronger. And the same thing can be said for aerobic fitness or speed development or whatever it is. There are principles that we follow. Now, the methods that you actually implement to get there may be more individualized, and in fact, oftentimes are. But your individual needs outside of what a general framework can say are going to be things that somebody with experience and knowledge needs to look at on a personal level versus just give you, hey, follow these exercise methods and that'll solve all your issues. Because I don't know your personal history. I don't know if you have an injury history. I don't know if there are different genetic components that you're kind of like, that are challenging for you, if there's certain lifts or things that kind of mess with you or whatever it is. It could be your personal life. So when you're taking this information into consideration, make sure you have an understanding that everybody has similar ways of getting to physiological adaptations. So the way your heart develops, the way your muscle develops, all that kind of good stuff, without knowing that some of the individual differences of how you get there are going to be on a person-by-person basis, okay? So as it relates to health and longevity and duty, first responders, some of the biggest challenges you face, obviously, are going to be schedule and how you are able to get your physical activity in for that. What I've seen based on scheduling is police have a more advantageous schedule when it comes to having some time either before or after shift. And that's not to say that everybody's going to want to work out before or after shift. I completely understand. So please take that with a grain of salt before you jump on this and say, I don't have the time or energy. I get it. I'm not saying you have to do things one way or another. But health and longevity, you want to make sure that you're getting enough physical activity to where you're not getting overweight, getting obese, and you're so sedentary in your lifestyle. And again, this is something that applies to general population, but it also does for first responders. We want to be active. We want to be making sure that we are doing enough physical activity to where we're warding off the potential of injury, the potential of long-term health issues, and we're able to perform our duties. So that means we're getting strength training in several times a week. We're getting some type of aerobic fitness in every week. And if you have a duty where you're required to sprint, in the case of, let's say, apprehending an individual. You want to be able to practice those things so that it doesn't come down to you having to perform that in the line of duty for the first time in 10 years. And I can tell you, as somebody who's in my mid 30s now, it's been a minute since I've sprinted. And if I were to just go out and sprint right now, my chances of tearing an Achilles or a hamstring would be very, very high, because the muscles and tendons involved in those structures are not ready for that. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, there's a ton of information out there on nutrition, and especially now, there's a lot of confusion out there. And I'm not going to tell you which way you should go as far as what you want to do with your personal life. All right, whatever decision you want to make that decision. But being the most informed is going to be the best for you for long-term health. Okay, if you want to be strong, if you want to live as long as possible, if you want to reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease and cancer, then you want to make sure that you are trying to follow some general guidelines, okay? And that would be one big thing that you are in control of is making sure that you are eating plenty of fiber, okay? So you can do this in the form of fiber supplement if you really need to, but the easiest way is to eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, okay? So the general recommendation is going to be 3 to 5 servings a day, all right? And you can kind of look into what a serving size looks like a little bit more, but you can kind of think of that as like the palm of your hand almost. And the reason being, fiber has a ton of benefits when it comes to cardiovascular health, when it comes to digestive health, when it comes to metabolic health. So we want to make sure that we're eating plenty of fiber regardless of what else we do. Now, if you are training for strength, which again, you generally should be, you want to be eating plenty of protein. And the recommendation that I would give to most individuals is going to be lean protein as much as possible. So that means protein that is not high in saturated fat, but not high in fat in general, because we can get extra calories from a lot of high fat protein. And again, if we're relatively sedentary, if we're sitting for long periods of time, then having a lot of fat is just going to be extra calories. And when we get those lean protein sources in the form of like chicken or fish, and fish being more high in omega-3 fatty acids, so like we're getting some good fats in there, which is good for that buzzword cholesterol, right? We are able to reduce our risk of having some of that potential of our cardiovascular disease kind of developing over time. And this is something, again, it develops over decades, so we can't think of it like, I made this change in my protein source and I've had a lot of benefits from it, but it's going to take time. All right. This is something that takes a lot of time to develop, both in a good and bad way. All right. And so another key benefit, or something that we should be looking for, is eating carbohydrates, because if we are doing some of our aerobic fitness, we want to have that fuel. And if we're doing weight training, we want to have that fuel from carbohydrate sources. And all of this stuff, generally speaking, we want to kind of limit our exposure to ultra-processed foods. So this is in the form of meat as well as our carbs. Okay, so what would an ultra-processed meat look like? That's going to be more of our deli meats, right? Some of that stuff that comes prepackaged, like a sausage, bacon, all of that good stuff, okay? And I know it's tasty, and there's no issue having it from time to time, but we just want to limit our overall exposure to that. And the same thing can go for our carbohydrate sources. The ultra-processed stuff, we want to try and limit as much as possible, okay? If you're having, cereal and Pop-Tarts and that sort of thing for breakfast, I understand it's a grab and go. It's very easy. But it's going to be detrimental to long-term health. This is where we might want to get some more of our rice. We can make some healthier options with pasta if you need to. If you don't need to, because you aren't eating a ton of ultra processed refined carbs, then feel free to eat whatever pasta you think, with whatever is available. It's not as important in that case. All of this stuff kind of scales to one way or another, but that's going to be kind of your keys for nutrition. Okay. Individual demands within that, calories, protein amounts, all of that good stuff. I'm not going to get into it because you're going to have different needs based on your size and goals and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's talk about rest and recovery. Rest and recovery is incredibly important for your profession. And what this means is when you have the opportunity to rest and recover, take full advantage of that. So if you are getting off shift and you are fried, obviously take the time to recover if you need to, okay? You want to be fresh for your job. You want to be fresh for your health. You want to be fresh for a workout that you have that you've planned, and you want to have good effort within that workout session. So make sure that we're actually taking advantage of that time. And what true rest looks like is making sure we are catching up on our sleep, trying to get restful sleep. So not just the amount of time that we're sleeping, but we're actually getting into that deep sleep state, and we're eating plenty, we're getting plenty of hydration, and we're trying to reduce all of our stressors, okay? So how we can do that stuff. So again, this is not me telling you based on personal experience, having done the job. So please just take this as principles. But getting into dark rooms, getting into a cool space, white noise if it's the middle of the day and you're trying to catch up in the sleep in the middle of the day and you have family stuff going on, trying to make sure that we have some noise that's kind of distracting from any outside noise happening. Making sure that we're eating plenty of carbs and protein and all that good stuff again. And then there are some potential supplements that might help. So I'm sure all of you have heard of melatonin at this point. That can be helpful with potentially enhancing sleep. And I'd say anything that can potentially work in your line of duty is probably going to be worth an effort to take. Magnesium has been shown to have potential health benefits for sleep as well. But having routines is probably going to be the best thing that you can do to enhance sleep and trying to get into restful states. Okay. So whatever your routine is, whether it's like, I'm going to do some deep breaths, I'm going to brush my teeth, I'm going to wear a night mask or whatever it is, I'm going to turn the air temp down to this level, I'm going to make sure that my space for sleeping is devoid of as much light as possible and distractions, and it's a cool space. All of that stuff matters, okay? That is going to help you get into a restful state so that you aren't subconsciously thinking about things, all right? When it comes to training and training intensity and volume, we want to make sure that we are having a good training intensity to where it's manageable. And again, this is more for long-term health and strength development, to where we aren't completely crashing after, all right? So think about this from an RPE scale, a 1 to 10 scale. We're in that 6 to 8 range basically perpetually. That's where we want to be almost all the time, okay? And that will give us a chance to get from one exercise or one training session to the next and work and still have the ability to recover and not overdo it. If we go into our 10 RPE, our 9 RPE, you're probably going to be gassed and you're probably going to need a good 48 hours to recover from that. It's not to say that we can't strategically use that, but that's something where we want to be using those RPEs very strategically and scarcely, all right? And volume is the king of getting injured and getting overworked. So if you feel fresh and you decide, I'm going to absolutely crush myself, just understand that comes with a cost. And if you aren't used to scaling your volume up and you go from flatlining to a high peak, you're going to increase that risk of injury. You're going to increase that risk of overdoing it and being exhausted and fatigued and kind of carrying that over to your next training session or your next shift, whatever it is, okay? So make sure that we are being strategic about using high volume sessions. If you know you have a few days off coming up, that might be an opportunity when you feel fresh to use higher volume. But you can relatively consistently be in that 6 to 8 RPE range and be able to crush workouts and get to the next shift or the next training session, whatever it is, and still be pretty good to go. Okay. And that is experience based on training athletes that had a 5 to 6 day schedule and a game. All right. And obviously that game is going to be both high intensity and high volume. So that's how we would manage a lot of that stuff. Now, to get into some of the programming and some of the ways that you would be able to program for fire or police. And, if you're EMT paramedic, this might be useful as well. You can take some of these tips and kind of work that in there. If you're working as a police officer, 410s or 5/8s or even, 3 to 4 12s, whatever it is, you have an opportunity to get a training session in. And, this is going to be something where you're going to have to determine what your schedule allows and how you feel. And I would say you're going to have to play with this a little bit too, to see if training before your shift is a worthwhile effort. Otherwise, getting that, day off, if you get a little bit of physical activity, that's probably going to be useful. And that can even be in the form of walking or a light jog, just to get some aerobic fitness, just to get some relatively low intensity endurance. And I would say if I were to do 410s, for instance, I would probably work out before shift at some point. And I know that kind of elongates the day, but I would imagine, obviously depending on the shift, which you can't really predict how the shift is going to go, you have a little bit of gas in the tank from having a light workout at the beginning. And that's, I would say for anybody, getting 3 sessions a week, 2 to 3 sessions a week of some resistance training is going to be a great goal. And 2 sessions a week to potentially 2 to 3 sessions a week of some aerobic fitness is going to be a really great goal as well. And however you kind of play with that within those schedules is going to be up to you based on how you feel. And I would say you just kind of have to give it a chance to see what works for you. If you have the opportunity to work out in the middle of your shift, fantastic. I'm not 100% sure on how that would work depending on each department, but that might be an opportunity to be able to do that as well. And for fire, 24/48 is kind of a brutal schedule to be able to have an opportunity to recover and get back to shift and be able to work through that. But that second day of your off day is probably where you're going to have the best opportunity to really get a training session in. Again, getting an RPE of 6 to 8 on intensity for a lift is going to be great, as well as some aerobic fitness. So whether that's bike, row, run, whatever you prefer, getting 30 minutes of something relatively low intensity, nothing crazy duration is going to be a great place to be. And I think 48-96, you have a better opportunity to be able to potentially get a low intensity workout in on your first day of shift. And then that second day after you come off shift, you're going to be able to have an opportunity to really train hard and then have another day or two to really recover optimally there. So you have a lot more opportunity, in my opinion, to be able to rest and recover and be able to do that. If you guys have any specific questions that you want answered based on some of this information I provided, please reach out in the comments. If I can do a little bit more for you, let me know.